Everyone, welcome to Thursday meditation. This evening we are focusing in on the new moon of wholeness, which is on 9/9, which is this Sunday. And while I'm working with this energy of wholeness, I began to wonder for myself what it meant. I've never thought about wholeness as a physical body requirement, and yet for good health there is a wholeness that we require. And much the same goes for the spiritual body, the mental body, and of course for enlightenment, the spiritual body. So I just sat around dithering about this for a while, and then I realized that wholeness for me is about the moment being complete as opposed to any one experience or any one issue being complete. And I came to that understanding because I know from experience that nothing in the universe is ever truly finished. That closure is one of the illusions of the duality. That just like energy is eternal and infinite and never dies, so too the issues of humanity that connect us to each other never end. They might change, we might view them differently, we might experience them differently, but the issues are the issues, which is why Maslow's hierarchy of needs makes such complete sense to all of us, and is such a wonderful classification of human doingness. So wholeness becomes something we experience in this moment with this issue or this person or this stage of our lives. And when I consider all of the memories that I hold inside of me, and I look at the memories in which I have unfinished business, thankfully, due to all of this work, I have very few moments of unfinished business. Couple of people here and there that I need to throttle still, but I've left that one for until I've crossed over and may strangulate them from the other side. That will always be unfinished business, mainly because it's not allowed and illegal for me to do that while I'm here. But, yes, I know, Zuma again. It's such a topic, that one. See, unfinished business. Where was I? Unfinished business. Most of the ages and stages of my life are complete. When I look at myself as age 5, there's a wholeness in that because I had a great deal of fun. And I have pictures and memories of me having a great deal of fun and living that part of my childhood fully. Now, we recently did a meditation in which you looked at yourself at all of these different ages and stages to get a feel for what is the thread that runs through them. What are the bits and pieces of yourself that are lying about inside of you and need to be gathered and reconnected to who you are now. So somewhere along the way, when we're working with wholeness, we're actually talking about putting the past in its place, firmly in the past, and creating an understanding of self in the now moment. Wholeness depends on letting the past be done. There's very little to be done with the past. It cannot be changed. I have an aunt who retells the past in her own words, and every time she retells it, it's a completely different past, or it's an exaggerated past, or it's a completely untrue past, and it just confuses the rest of us, and it disconnects us from the past as we experienced it and as we know it. It's not even that we have a different perspective. It's just that each time she tells the story, she colors herself differently in it, so that she looks brighter and bolder all the time. Now, we have a tendency to do that to ourselves sometimes to color ourselves brighter and bolder, and sometimes to color ourselves darker and uglier. And even when we're doing that, it is in the context of a past that we do not know the truth of. The fact is that in that moment in the past, when you were having that experience, your perception of yourself was vastly different from what it is today. So when we reframe the story in the now moment, we can go back into that past and reframe it and tell the story to create wholeness without lying to ourselves or without placing a different perspective on it. It's about actually gleaning the truth of it, the truth of the feeling from it. But even then, it is just a reframing and to some extent a living in the past. Wholeness says, I look at the past and I realize there's not much that can be done with it other than to forgive it, which is the work of the knot of Vishnu that we're doing in the Tuesday group. Learning from it, which is the work that we do every week, and grieving it. There is always the emotional component to creating wholeness. So the past holds its space as something that we grieve, not just people, not just places, but ourselves in that past. And wholeness requires that we complete that unfinished business. So I have very interesting discussions with various people in my life, especially my students, and I learn so much. So I was having this chat with Oliver and I was reminding him that as we go through different ages and stages in the human cycle, the human cycle is attached to the physical body. The soul cycle is not attached to anything. It is a continuous cycle that flows into and out of lifetimes. So this lifetime is a stage in the soul cycle of being, and within that stage we have a variety of stages all the way from newborn to old age or death as the physical stages. We have stages of hormonal development, which is associated with our emotional stages. We have stages of mental development or intellectual and intuitive development, which is associated with our mental bodies. And of course, we have experiencing, which brings us our character, our personalities, our deepest selves to the fore. And how we live that determines the quality of each stage. What we aspire to at age 5 is very different from what we aspire to at age 50. And if it isn't, then it means that the 5-year-old hasn't grown up into a 50-year-old and lived all of those stages. And that there's very definitely a mental imbalance there. But one of the things that we forget is that when we're done with an age or stage of our lives, we must be done with it. We must complete it in ourselves. What we do as human beings in the duality is that we drag it into the next age and stage, and we want to perfect it there while we're living that age and stage. So age 5 gets dragged into age 15, and age 15 gets dragged into age 35, and we are eternally the brat, or the abandoned child, or the wounded child, or the orphaned child who didn't do this and didn't experience that and didn't finish this. I mean, I have clients who talk to me about how they don't ever recall going for ice cream with their fathers or their mothers, or that kind of memory, but they hear other people talking about that, and suddenly that becomes the point of focus. I didn't go for ice cream with my father, and so I am so badly damaged as a child. And then you say, but didn't you do that with your father, and didn't you do that, and didn't you do that? Oh yes. Well, hello? Why are you so attached to this? I didn't have ice cream with my father when you had all of those other things. And if we stopped and did a survey, all of those people from whom you have acquired this rule for good fatherhood haven't done any of the things that you've done. So other people are not saying, my father took me to work with him every day, and I sat there next to him in his chair, listening to him talk to people and listening to the way others talked to him. They didn't have all that time and energy with him. So while you are sitting here bemoaning the fact that he never took you for ice cream, you are neglecting all of the other aspect of that age or stage that fed into your being and completed aspects of you, left aspects of you whole. Why are you clinging to this that you didn't do and didn't have? Because you need something to complain about? Because you want one issue to attach all of your other dramas to? Because this is the safest story to tell. Because this is the story nobody else can heal. And that's what we do with ourselves. We find this thing, this absence of something, this lack of something, and we attach everything to it. So all the unknown stuff about ourselves that we didn't do and we didn't live, we associate it with that person outside of ourselves, victimize ourselves in the process, play the blame game, and eradicate any possibility of healing and coming back into wholeness. And when I say, so take yourself out for an ice cream, this is too simple a remedy. Oh, but it won't be the same. Of course it won't be the same. It will be you taking yourself for an ice cream. It will you paying attention to how valuable is this experience of eating this ice cream to begin with. And if you are a father, take your child for ice cream. Fulfill the need to eat the ice cream. Fulfill the need to make that journey. Fulfill the need in some way, because your body will get the message that you are no longer attached to my father didn't take me for ice cream. I know it sounds like a ridiculous, corny, stupid, small-minded example, but it is in fact the safest example I can use right now, because there are so many ways in which we traumatize ourselves and prevent wholeness. I have 38-year-olds, 39-year-olds, 34-year-olds. I have 23-year-olds sitting in my chair saying, I should have done this by now and I should have done that by now. You know, I have a 23-year-old who says to me, I should be married by now. And I'm saying, in whose rule book? If you were my child at age 23 saying I should be married by now, I'd be clapping you upside the head, saying pack a backpack, go get on a train in India, and when you've grown up and learnt that marriage is not the be-all and end-all of life, come back and say that again. Where does this rule book come from? And all this rule book does is that it prevents us from experiencing our wholeness in the moment. It sets us up for each age and stage having a series of accomplishments in order for that stage to be finished or completed. Hormonally speaking, we move through those ages and stages anyway. A woman and a man, both parties, are going to get to menopause whether they've built that house or not, whether they've got a job or not, whether they've had children or not, whether they've become grandparents or not, whether they've ticked off 6 items on the bucket list or not. The circumstances are not going to determine whether their bodies reach that age and stage. And when a gynecologist tells a woman, you are going to have more difficulties with menopause because you didn't have children, he's talking nonsense. Usually, it's a male gynecologist saying that kind of thing, somebody who is never going to have children and is very likely going through menopause himself. Because nobody can predetermine the experiencing of these shifts and changes inside your body. Now, that might not be a really good example for men, but men also go through menopause, and it might not be a really good example for the younger people in the crew. But here's the thing. When you get to a stage and your body goes, I'm feeling broody, I feel like I should be having children, Well, that's your message. Now your body is saying, I'm at that age and stage. If it feels like it's going to have cravings and you're not pregnant yet, you're at that age and stage. The intelligence of the body speaks for itself. It is growing without your interference. It knows what it needs. And just in case you've forgotten, the body is associated with 308 chakras or transmitters of energy. And the majority of those chakras are holding the information of I, the soul, fully present here and available to guide you on every age and stage, to ensure that you are maintaining your own wholeness. We don't listen, so we miss those opportunities, and then we go into grief. But that innate grief about what is incomplete inside of us, in accordance with our soul's desires, is very different from the grief that we create inside of ourselves based on the rule book that we subscribe to unconsciously. So I should have done that by age 30 is the rule book, and the body is saying, oh, age 30, I've just done my Saturn return at 29, I need to relax a little, I need to come out of turmoil, I'll do that when I'm 33. At age 30, somebody is saying, I should have bought my Ferrari by now because this is the biggest trend with the millennials. And yet the body is saying, 29 was my Saturn return. Every karmic debt that I owe has come into being. I cannot be expending my energy on a Ferrari. I need to set out into the world and find myself and have an adventure and find my purpose and get passionate about something more than making money to buy a Ferrari. And then we have an inherent conflict within ourselves, and the rule book says, buy the Ferrari. 10 years later, you sit in my chair saying, I feel so bad, I didn't do this and I didn't do that and I didn't do that. What did you do instead? I bought a Ferrari. Okay. So we must all stop at whatever age or stage we're at and check how much of the grief we hold inside of us due to the judgments that we make of ourselves based on this illusionary rule book is necessary. How much of it is necessary? Where I'm sitting, it's completely unnecessary because really it's just going to kill you for no reason at all. But if you're going to have it, as is the nature of all humanity, let's make something meaningful out of it. Let's create a learning out of it. Let's use it to inspire you and incentivize you into becoming more. There is no need to grieve over what you cannot change. There is every reason to work with where you are now and change what you can. This is called the Serenity Prayer, right? St. Francis of Assisi said, Lord, give me the wisdom to change the things. No, the wisdom to know the difference between what I can change and what I can't change. And it takes wisdom. It takes experience of life to do that. The soul's yearning, the grief of the soul, becomes a restlessness inside of us. It becomes that deep, innate yearning for the more of self to be expressed. And that comes up from our zeal chakras at the back of our heads, just below the back of the third eye. It comes up in our throat chakras as a desire for full expression. It comes up in our heart centers as a desire to live love as fully as possible. It comes up in our sacral chakras as a desire to co-create with the universe and be an evolving being. It comes up in every one of our psoas muscles, chakras, because that's where we get stuck in the rigidity of these illusionary rules and we don't move forward. And when we experience it in our physical bodies as distress or emotional discomfort, we call it grief. It's not grief. It is in fact yearning. It is a desire within yourself to be the more of yourself. Humanity is so accustomed to grief, however, that we put it through as that emotion. We associate it with things that we have loved and lost, and we associate it with all of the opportunities we think have passed us by, and we clap ourselves upside the head for no good reason. And sometimes we wallow in a little bit of self-pity with it. Forgiving yourself for not doing is great, really. Because when I talk to people on the other side, their biggest regret is all the things they didn't do. So, for every age and stage, if you sit down quietly and think about the rule book and what you could have, would have, should have done at that age and stage, forgive yourself for all the things you didn't do, and then, at this age and stage, live the things that you can do. There is no point getting to 10 years from now and doing this again. So learn from it. All the things you did do. Now when you get to the other side, very few people, souls, actually regret the things they did do. Because they begin to see it in a different context. They begin to see it beyond the circumstances of their lives, beyond just the people. And I've made mention of this before when I've said, if we are choosing the people we are born to as a sacred contract, then we must understand that the two parties involved know, firstly, what the contract is about, what it is that each party is here to learn. And in doing so, have to enact a role, have to become something that forces and pushes you into your evolution, that forces and pushes you into recognizing that inner voice that is guiding you into your own growth and learning. And it's a difficult concept for most people to believe that a person in their lives can be so completely horrible and demand compassion and forgiveness and kindness and being loved anyway. And that's the learning. That they are designed to be that horrible. The soul might cringe at being that horrible, but once they've crossed over and they see the purpose of it, there is harmony in that. And in fact, if you imagine this for a moment, souls meeting on the other side and patting each other on the back and saying, thank you so much, that was a brilliant performance. You did really well. Now, do you remember Sir Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter? We know the difference between Anthony and the cannibal. And that's exactly what we're talking about. The cannibal is the physical plane doingness. Anthony would be the soul self. It's just like we know the difference between Robin Williams, the depressed man, and the comedian. We know the difference. We know the difference between the role that's being played and the actual person. Why don't we know that with ourselves? Why don't we look at these people in our lives and in the spirit of finding wholeness, look at that experience and say, thank you. Or, I see the purpose that you're serving. Or, I'm willing to allow, just, set the doubts aside for a moment and allow that you are playing a role right now and let me use it quite well. If you should get to the other side and discover that it wasn't actually the role you'd signed up for, well then by all means have your fight on the other side, where there is no such thing as pain. But if you're having that fight here, then the person you're creating the pain for is yourself. The person you're creating the grief for is yourself. The person you're creating the stuckness for is yourself. And in doing so, you eradicate the possibilities of wholeness. There is nothing to be done with the past other than to heal it. We can't just let it go. We must heal it, because we know that it lives inside of us and that it informs all of our future decisions and our present moment decisions. So we must heal it. But digging and delving in it, living in it day after day after day, and wallowing in it isn't serving anyone, least of all you in the now moment. And of course, the past doesn't offer wholeness. The past offers you a litany of your mistakes and possibilities unmet. When we grieve what is incomplete about any age and stage, we must do so to liberate ourselves from that age and stage and recognize where we are now. Whatever age I am on the physical plane, I am always that going on 108. I remember being 40 for 2 years before I turned 40, because I was practicing. Everybody said you were going to, you hit the fabulous 40s. So I thought I needed to be prepared to be fabulous. So I turned 40 for 2 years, and then I turned 40. It was so awesome. Really, nobody can fight with me about that. That's my decision. It's my bloody age, isn't it?
True.
Yeah, just because my ID book says that's how old I should be, in terms of how much time has passed since I took my first breath on the planet, doesn't mean that's what I am. I look at people's auric fields and I say to people, dear Lord, you're looking 39, and they go, really? I'm only 34. And I go, well, best you catch up with yourself. Best you lighten up. Best you stop being so burdened as if you're already an old lady. And then I look at other people and say, my God, you're looking 5. Shouldn't you be about 34 now? And they go, oh, yes, I feel 5 every day. Our auric fields reflect us at the ages at which we are operating the most. Some people look 23 and really they're 27. And they think I am being complimentary when I say, you look too young for your age. The ages and stages of soul development flow primarily in harmony with physical development and the way our physical bodies develop to meet the challenges that the soul has brought through. Becoming parents, becoming partners, becoming householders. These are all the challenges that we've created for ourselves. So when I talk about a contract and I say, you've agreed to have 2 children, you're running late, get on the bus with this one. It's because there is an age and stage to it. There is a divine timing to it. When we use the rule book as per what everybody else is doing, well, then we're all going to be failures for the rest of our lives. I met an 18-year-old recently who is studying to be a neuroscientist. He is that quick, that clever, that he was passing college at age 13. He's one of those dynamic, gifted kids. If you see the talented children in the world, like the chap in India who was employed by Google recently, I mean, we're all going to look really stupid by comparison to that. We're not all those kinds of geniuses. So by and large, there is one generic formula that says, I, the soul, am guiding my physical body into a series of experiences to meet the needs of the soul through various ages and stages. That in turn was classified beautifully by psychologists like Jung and Freud and Maslow for our purposes to understand that psyche, to understand human consciousness. Those psychologists didn't give us a rule book. The consumer society system gave us a rule book. The bank gave us a rule book. Government gave us a rule book. So feel free to throw the rule book out and look at yourself in terms of what have you already accomplished from a soul perspective. Can you feel a wholeness there? And from a soul perspective, the one thing that souls look for is, have I loved enough? Did I love enough at age 5? And what kind of love was that? Did I love enough at age 10? And what kind of love was that? Was I loving enough at age 18? And what kind of love was that? And if you just look at those ages and stages, you'll see the variety of love that you have experienced. And sometimes that love is associated with passion. Sometimes it's associated with compassion. Sometimes it's associated with just a feeling of belonging and community spirit. But every step of the way you will have had experiences of all of the frequencies of love available in the universe, and the ones that you have lived the most and expressed the most are living inside you to give you a sense of wholeness. And if you're not living that anymore, then by all means, grieve. Really, the only thing worth grieving, thank you, is the loss of love. And just as I'm thinking that, my aunt who died this morning has arrived in the training room, and she's just awesome. It's so wonderful to me to see somebody I love just glowing and beautiful and peaceful. Because when we get busy dying and we get busy focusing our lives on others and feeling that this incomplete life that we have is being judged by others, it kills our spirit, really. It focuses us on all the wrong things. We don't see how wonderful we are and what a massive achievement who we've been and how we've loved actually is. What a difference it's made to everybody. And this aunt has never ever known exactly how much of a purpose she has fulfilled in all of our lives in terms of being the kind of nurturing mother that we could all run to. When I found out I was pregnant with Sonali, I didn't go home to tell my mother. I didn't go home to tell my sisters. I sure as hell didn't go home to tell Sonali's father. I went to this aunt because she was the safest place to go to. And she was the safest place, not because she lived out in the bundus far away from everybody else, but because she was the most accepting, non-judgmental space. Almost all of her sentences started with, never mind. Just never mind that, and she would feed you. Never mind that, we'll figure it out. Never mind what those people say, what does it feel like? Never mind. And never mind meant do not overthink it. Do not put it in your head and ride roughshod over yourself with it. Never mind. Whatever it was fixable. Whatever it was forgivable. And whatever it was, you outgrew it. To be loved that way is a blessing. To love that way is an even greater blessing, because the feeling of that is something that lives inside of you and nourishes all those so-called blemishes of mistakes, and nourishes all of those empty spaces that you think exist because you didn't do. You may have no idea how all the things you didn't do have actually served the rest of us, because you do not have the big picture. An old friend of mine from the time we were in nursery school threatened to become a pastor in a Christian church. That he was born Muslim made absolutely no difference to his big dream. And I remember us going to Sunday school together, and his father would stand outside the church waiting for him with a very cross look on his face, and he would get a scolding the whole walk home. But he was determined that he was going to be a pastor in the church. his mother would always despair of this, because regardless of what she said, regardless of how often he went to mosque and how he was raised in the Muslim tradition, he was insistent he was becoming a pastor. When we all went to university, by then I had moved out of the community, so I lost touch. But when I went back to university, I met him at university, and he had become a very typical Muslim young man with the beard and the cap, and he was going to mosque every Friday. And his mother was completely relieved that he had gone on to study, and he was doing pharmacy and all sorts of things. And he was no longer intent on becoming a Christian priest. She was delighted that he wasn't doing that anymore. And when I asked him about it, inside, he still wanted to be a priest in a Christian church. But he had finally understood that if he did that, if he fulfilled that dream of his, that thing that he had talked about the whole way through childhood, he would be a wound to his parents. He would create controversy in his community. He would lose the girl he loved because she was also Muslim. And basically it would just shake everything up to the extent that life would never be the same again. And everything that he loved and held dear would be threatened. So he made what he called the mature decision to study pharmacy. I've always thought about that. And when I wonder what I would have done under those circumstances, my rebellious self says I would have become the priest, regardless of everything else, because I've always just done what I felt is true of me. And even that's not entirely true. We all operate in a context. We see the people we love. We see what's going on. There is this unspoken understanding and this unspoken nurturing that we fulfill because that's who we are. And when we haven't done something, we must check. In that context, in that circumstance, was not doing the right thing. Sometimes we just stop doing something because we know that if we take it to the next level and the next level and the next level, we will lose too much in the becoming. The spiritual pathway teaches you that. As you grow and you lose the layers of yourself that keep the pretense of you intact in the world, you lose the people who have tuned in to that pretense, who love the pretense and have no notion of the true you, who are so engaged with the pretense that they cannot recognize you. So the fear of loss, the fear of becoming something that even you don't recognize, keeps us or inhibits us from moving forward as we think we should. At age 45, my friend became a priest in the Christian church. He left his family and went off to study theology. He was waking up every night dreaming of Jesus Christ, dreaming of this light that he needed to move into, dreaming of himself at a pulpit. And it became too much, like he was going mad inside of himself, and it became too much, and he had to risk losing everything to become what his inner self was talking about non-stop. And he lost nothing at all. If anything, everybody who knew him and loved him anyway, had gotten to a stage in their lives where they understood that he needed to do this, that he had put it off long enough, that he wasn't doing it just from his ridiculous, rebellious teenage self, and he wasn't doing it to be different in the world, and he wasn't doing it to flout his parents' convention, that by then he was mature enough to know his own mind and know his own heart, and he had proven himself to be somebody that they could rely on. So the acceptance of this decision was easier. And this is what happens in terms of the ages and stages of our lives. Everything comes to fruition at the right time. If there is a yearning inside of you that has gone unanswered and it flares up every now and again, nurture it. It will blaze into a fire that consumes you when you are ready, when you can manage it. Until then, let's work at just being whole in the moment, to feel as fully as possible, to speak your truth as fully as possible, to listen as fully as possible, to allow as much as possible, to accept as much as possible. The Four Agreements reminds us to just do our best in every moment. And if doing your best is guided by seeking wholeness in the moment, of leaving nothing unfinished in that moment, you'll feel better. Every day you will feel better. There will be no need for forgiveness later. We say to people, hug each other. Fulfill the moment if you can. Hug each other. And if that's not okay for you, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, in your mind, there is nothing stopping you from embracing somebody energetically and completing the moment in that simple way. Because the exchange of energy that is truly loving eases anything else that might have been happening. It is a frequency that uplifts and brings forth a charge of serotonin in the other. And of course, as we all know, it keeps us connected. Use every frequency of love you've ever experienced to finish your unfinished business, to create wholeness for all of the past stages of your life and prepare you for the stages yet to come. And use every frequency of love you have ever experienced to make the frequency of love that you are now more whole, more complete, more available and accessible. Because that ultimately is why we're here. To love and be loved. Isn't that so?
This mosquito is not loving me.
Let us meditate.